And can you talk about what is in the bill? Because you had a really good piece where you talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the bill, and it's not just direct payments. Even though, look, the direct payments affect the most people. They affect 80% of the public, or maybe even more. So that's that's always going to be the number one thing people think about. I mean, you can't get away from that. But there's a lot of stuff in the bill. It essentially dismantles the corporate money cannon, the bailouts thing, and it slices that up, the money that was provided for it to allow for it, and gives a lot of that money to people who are struggling. So, I mentioned the $600 payments right now. Maybe they go to $2,000. There's unemployment. So it extends these two expiring programs for 11 weeks and then adds a $300 a week boost, federal boost to the unemployment, all unemployment systems, whether these two expiring programs or just your regular state unemployment system. So that's $1,200 a month right there for anyone who's unemployed, in addition to the $600, which is per person. So like a family of four in direct payments would get $2,400. It's $600 per household. Per person per household, and the unemployment benefit. So there, it adds up. There's $25 billion in rental assistance, which is not really enough to cover everything in terms of rental arrears, but it would help some people. There is $7 billion towards a broadband program that gives $50 off of broadband for people in low-income areas. Until that pot is used up. There is, trying to think of some of the other stuff in this bill. There's $15 billion for something called Save Our Stages, which was a big Schumer priority, which goes to independent music venues, independent theaters, museums, and things like that. It's a direct grant program. There's $45 billion for transportation. Some of that goes to airlines for another bailout of airlines. Some of it goes to mass transit. Some of it goes to a highway fund. Probably shouldn't. Probably should all go to mass transit. There's a decent chunk of money. I mentioned some money for the vaccine. There's also some money for testing and tracing. There's some money for hospitals. There's about close to $100 billion for schools to rejigger them, get them ready to accept students again. And then the biggest part of the bill is actually this return of the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, which was the small business grant program that allowed small businesses to basically get a loan for up to 2.5 months of payroll plus some other expenses. And then that loan could be, if they used it in the proper way, would be converted into a grant. So now this allows a second draw. So small companies that got one loan, got one PPP loan, can now get a second one. And if they show losses over the course of the year. So this is helpful to restaurants and storefronts and things like that. I see evictions being asked in the chat. There's an extension of the eviction moratorium only by a month, but the idea there is that the president actually, through executive order, extended the eviction moratorium most recently through an order of the CDC, and that Biden could do that again. So they extended it essentially through the Trump presidency, and then Biden could pick it up from there. So whether he will or not, I mean, that's up to Biden. There's also entire other bills have been thrown into this thing. Like there's a fix for something called surprise billing. This is when you go to perhaps an emergency room and it's in your network, your insurance network, and then you get an anesthetic, and it turns out that anesthesiologist is not in your network. And then you take this huge out-of-network bill that is given right to you. They actually, Democrats and Republicans got together, did a fix for that. That will mean that individuals will not get that surprise bill, and there will be this arbitration process between the insurer and the providers, who are mostly private equity firms. There are these physician staffing groups that are private equity owned that have been doing this surprise billing and jacking up prices. The fix is a compromise. Like, it's still going to be elevated rates. The arbitrator can't use Medicare and Medicaid rates when determining what the proper rate can be. And that just will elevate the price, and we'll feel that probably in our premiums, but there won't be a case where somebody who goes to an emergency room and through no fault or even understanding of their own gets an out-of-network service. There's no longer going to be the case where they'll just get hit with a $10,000 bill. So, I mean, that is certainly, it's progress, game of inches progress, but it's definitely progress. And that's all I can remember right now. There's a few other things in the bill, but
a lot of people are Mario Stanfield says they did it to me after 19 procedures. Wow. 19 different ones, or
are you talking about the surprise billing? Or yeah. Oh. Yeah, I mean, it was a terrible thing that should never have been allowed, and this fix is probably close to a decade in the making, and it was stopped for a while by our friend Richie Neal, who was he's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, has a lot, Blackstone is a big supporter of his, and other private equity firms who own these physician staffing companies, and he was blocking the bill on their behalf until he finally, they got a solution, and the solution ends up being somewhat favorable to those companies, allows them to, at least if they can't do surprise billing, they can still get a decent, like an elevated rate for their services. So this was a Richie Neal special, which is another funny part of it.
Wow. Who, of course, for people who don't know, sorry, I may be about to sneeze. Sorry about that.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank God it happened. That would be really anticlimactic. Richie Neal, of course, is the person who Alex Morse was challenging, and then like the most old school, you almost can't make it up, like old school homophobic, conflating being gay with some kind of predator thing happened where they all, it was like the Boston, what was it, the college Dems? Anyway, that's
the colleges of one of the colleges up there.
Amherst.
I think it was Amherst.
Not the private Amherst, but like
UMass Amherst.
UMass.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. I did an episode on this from this show on Useful Idiots. I should know, but go back and watch those episodes. Both of them are good. He's great, Alex Morse. Lots of people are asking about the foreign spending.
Right. So, I mean, this foreign spending is part of, it's sort of standard stuff that gets pushed through year after year. It's in the State Department budget. It was a good number of it was in Trump's budget. So he's now asking to take out things that he put in himself. And again, it's spending, but it's spending that in the overall scheme of things is not that big. Now, look, I mean, there's plenty in the budget that they could deal with. You notice that Trump, for all talking about, foreign aid and things, didn't say anything about the military budget, like the real bloated part of his budget. He didn't mention that. He didn't mention $1.5 billion for his border wall, which is in the bill. So it was very selective in terms of, and it was in the, like, John McCain used to do this all the time. He would come up with like things that sounded funny, that, why are we giving money to the amberjack fish? Why are we doing, and he'd decry this spending when it turns out it wasn't very much money. Sometimes there was scientific merit to what was being studied. Sometimes these things were kind of wrongly defined and understood. So it wasn't really talking about what, he thought they were talking about. So, yeah, I mean, that part of the bill is, or that part of Trump's complaint is just kind of, it's very populist, but it's also kind of nonsensical. It's kind of stuff Rand Paul would say.
Someone said something about streaming, like piracy, like making it.
Yes, we wrote about this at the Prospect, actually. Yes, there is. They managed to fit in, and I believe it was Tom Tillis who wrote this bill, who just barely won his Senate race in North Carolina. A bill that would make unauthorized streaming of copyrighted content a felony, right? So it would completely change the criminal statute around that, and could subject people to major fines. And I don't know about prison time, but it seems like completely ridiculous, especially when this wasn't part of the public debate. It wasn't really discussed very often. And we knew it. We wrote about it like 2 weeks ago, but and we got a lot of traffic off it. Actually, we got a lot of attention for it, but it didn't, obviously not enough to stop it from being included. And AOC, when she saw this, after it sort of got out that was in the bill, said, we're being asked to read this thing that was almost 5,600 pages. They got it at 2 p.m. on Monday, and they were asked to vote on it at about 9 p.m., right? So the greatest of speed readers was not going to be able to read everything in this bill. And members of Congress who voted on it probably read none of what's actually in this bill, which is more common than you'd like to think, right, and like to admit. But anytime you have something, this kind of situation where something has to pass, you have a must-pass bill, everyone throws on their, extra goodies, because it's like there's a train leaving the station and everybody has to get on that train because it's the only train that's leaving. And so this is like almost a year's worth of legislating that is in this bill. Congress literally this year passed 28 bills. I think 28 or 29 bills. But this one is like a monster. It's like all the bills, right? Because because it was the only thing leaving before Congress, left town and ended for this session, everything got thrown into it, and there are obviously some consequences to that people don't realize. Someone
asked if Trump can line item veto the pork, e.g., Egypt aid.
Well, I would question the premise that it's pork. I mean, some of this stuff isn't great, but it was stuff that was decided on a bipartisan basis, like it or not. It's the budget, and it's a very small. I mean, this is the thing. Like, people look at foreign aid and think it's a huge part of the budget when it's like less than 1%. What I determined is, like, if you look at the 14 programs that he called pork, and you took all that money and you plowed it into additional money for the checks, you would get about $13 per person. You get like $13 or $14 per person. You would not get $1,400 more per person. Right. So if he wants to find more, then maybe. But no, there is no line item veto for presidents, or there was one, and then under Clinton, the Supreme Court found it unconstitutional. So there is no line item veto. I mean, it would be an interesting question if by some amazing circumstance, McConnell said, okay, fine, I'll give you the $2,000 checks, and they pass a bill that says $2,000 checks, and they give it to Trump. It's like, here, you have the regular bill that already passed, you have the $2,000 checks, sign away. And Trump says, oh, no, you didn't get rid of the pork. I'm not going to sign it. I mean, that's possible, but he would look pretty bad, I think, there, like, over some minuscule thing about the Asian carp to deny people, $2,000 of survival money when they're in the middle of a pandemic and having problems. So the populism kind of cuts both ways. Like, I don't think he can necessarily get away from that.